Kithkin is one of Magic's oldest creature types, originally making its debut in Legends. However, for a very long time it only appeared on a single card. Before, several of them appeared in Time Spiral block, and then 2007's Lorwyn block featured them prominently. Kithkin are small humanoids that are almost always white. So far, the only planes we've seen them on are Dominaria and Lorwyn Shadowmoor. In all, there are 72 cards that either have the Kithkin creature type or create Kithkin creature tokens, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic the Gathering. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours. And a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Regional Championships. At number 10, it's Gold Meadow Harrier. For 1 white mana, it's a 1/1, and you can pay 1 white mana and tap it to tap target creature. Creatures that can tap down other creatures on the cheap feel pretty good, as they often function as removal of sorts, but removal that can move around and tap down whatever your opponent's best creature is. This can both allow you to stop a creature from attacking and stop a creature from blocking. The Harrier's top 8s all came in Kithkin decks in Lorwyn block constructed, where it had extra upside because the deck ran various Kithkin payoffs. However, the Harrier doesn't have any top 8s since 2008. At number 9, it's Sen's Enlistment. For 3 generic and a white, it's a sorcery that makes 2 1/1 Kithkin creature tokens. That's more mana than you usually expect to pay for a couple of 1/1s, but the Enlistment also comes with Retrace, which means you can cast it from your graveyard by discarding a land from your hand, in addition to paying Enlistment's other costs. Unlike most mechanics and effects that let you cast a card from your graveyard, Sen's Enlistment doesn't get exiled when you retrace it, and casting it every single turn is very possible. Its points have all come in Pauper, a format where only commons are legal, where it can be a pretty great win condition, one that is very difficult to deal with. Spot removal is never going to deal with this problem. However, Sen's Enlistment doesn't have any top 8 since 2019. At number 8, it's Thistledown Liege. For 1 generic and 3 blue-white hybrid mana, it's a 1/3 with flash, and it gives your other white and blue creatures +1/+1. Having buff effects on a creature with flash is pretty sweet, as it means this can act as a combat trick of sorts, or even blank some removal spells by buffing a creature out of nowhere. The Liege gets particularly spicy if you have creatures that are both blue and white, as it will give them +2/+2. The Liege's points all came in Lorwyn block constructed, where it was played in Kithkin decks, as well as in token aggro decks that use cards like Spectral Procession. Buffing 1/1 flying tokens can win a game pretty quickly. However, the Liege doesn't have any top 8 since 2008. At number 7, it's Gold Meadow Stalwart. For 1 white mana, it's a 2/2, and as an additional cost to cast it, you have to reveal a Kithkin in your hand or pay 3 generic. Obviously, you don't want to be paying 4 mana for a 2/2, but you do really want to pay 1 white mana for a 2/2. And that means you can really only play the Stalwart in Kithkin heavy decks. And indeed, the Stalwart's points all came in Kithkin decks in both block and standard, and it hasn't put up any top 8 since rotating out of the format. At number 6, it's Wizened Sen. For 2 white mana, it's a 2/2, and other Kithkin you control get +1/+1. Paying only 2 mana for a 2/2 creature that's also a lord is awesome, and not something we see very often in the history of Magic, as Merfolk is really the only other creature type that can do this. It's great because if you're playing a lord like this in the right deck, it's going to buff all of your creatures and give you a much better board state no matter when you draw it, and that's worth way more than just 2 mana. Of course, this also means that the Sen hasn't ever seen play outside of block or standard, as there simply aren't enough powerful Kithkin for Kithkin decks to be a thing, and formats outside of those two, with smaller card pools. At number 5, it's Knight of Meadowgrain. For 2 white, it's a 2/2 with First Strike and Lifelink. This is a fairly efficient French vanilla creature even by today's standards, and that was even more the case back in 2007. While it saw some play in Kithkin decks and block and standard, like several of the cards we've seen so far, it also had a life outside of Kithkin decks since it was also played in more traditional white weenie decks in standard, but it's another card that doesn't have any top 8 since rotating out of standard. At number 4, it's Cloud Goat Ranger. For 3 generic and 2 white, it's a 3/3, and when it enters, you create 3 1/1 Kithkin tokens. You can also tap 3 untapped Kithkin you control to give it +2/+0 when flying until end of turn. This is just a really great rate to begin with, as you spend 5 to get 6/6 worth of stats across 4 bodies, and in situations where all those bodies on the ground aren't letting you attack effectively, you can send the Ranger into the sky to smash in for 5 a turn. While it's another card that found success in block and standard Kithkin decks, it was also a crucial part of standard token decks, since it was one of the most efficient token generators around. It even has a single point that came in a modern black-white token deck. However, it doesn't have any top 8 since 2012. At number 3, it's Figure of Destiny. For 1 red-white hybrid mana, it's a 1/1, and it comes with 3 activated abilities that make it progressively stronger. You can pay 1 red-white hybrid mana to make it a 2/2 Kithkin Spirit, 3 red-white hybrid mana to make it a 4/4 Kithkin Spirit Warrior, but you can only use that ability if the figure is a spirit. In other words, you can only use it if you use the first ability, and then you can pay 6 red-white hybrid mana, and if the figure is a warrior, it becomes an 8/8 Kithkin Spirit Warrior avatar with flying and first strike. This sort of creature that has abilities that allow it to slowly upgrade itself is something we see every few sets or so. For example, in Foundations, we have Kellen Planar Trailblazer, and this is where we first saw this type of design. I think they're cool because they really effectively tell a story. In the case of the figure, he starts out as a regular Kithkin, but then dies on the battlefield and becomes a spirit, and over time, he eventually becomes an incredibly powerful avatar of destiny. Anyway, obviously, this Kithkin is a powerful 1-drop since it can scale throughout the game and be relevant on almost any board. Unsurprisingly, it's been played in red and white aggro decks and block, standard, extended, and modern, but it doesn't have any top 8 since 2018. At number 2, it's Gadok Teague. For a green and a white, it's a 2/2 that prevents non-creature spells with a mana value of 4 or greater, or with X in their mana cost, from being cast. Gadok is what is often called a hate bear. That is, a 2-mana 2/2 with an effect that is really disruptive and hates on particular strategies. The fact you can run this little guy out there and just shut down huge chunks of some decks is pretty incredible. Obviously, Gadok is great at hating on decks that plan on casting big spells. Those types of decks are often control, ramp, or combo decks, and those show up in most formats, and as a result, Gadok Teague has seen play in most formats. For example, in Modern, he's good at hating on Tron decks, Storm, and Ad Nauseam. He's also useful in Legacy against Storm and Ad Nauseam, and he nerfs a bunch of cards that are commonly played in both Modern and Legacy, like Chalice of the Void, Engineered Explosives, Hangerback Walker, and Walking Ballista. He even sees main deck play in most decks since he has such a reasonable baseline and he's very easy to tutor up in lots of green decks. He even hates on one of the most heavily played cards in Legacy, Force of Will. Even if your opponent can cast it for free, it still has a mana value greater than 4, so Gadok Teague shuts the card down. Gadok is going to continue to put up top 8s in Modern and Legacy, and I think it will be the number 1 card on this list in the very near future. For now though, that card is Burrenton Forge Tender, our second consecutive Kithkin that hates on a specific strategy. The Forge Tender is really good at hating on red decks. It's 1 white mana for a 1/1 with protection from red, and you can sacrifice it to prevent all damage a red source of your choice would deal this turn. Obviously enough, red decks are all about doing lots of damage quickly, and if you can sacrifice the Forge Tender to blank one of their burn spells, that alone can sometimes mean game over for them, since red decks' main weakness is that they don't really have a mid to late game, and the Forge Tender makes it pretty likely you get there between blocking red creatures forever and having the ability to stop an entire red source of damage. Unsurprisingly, the Forge Tender has almost exclusively been a sideboard card and sees lots of play when red decks are good, especially in Modern. It actually saw a little bit of a renaissance over the last few years as Fury decks started to dominate the format. Unlike a lot of prevention effects, it doesn't just prevent damage to one creature or something like that. Instead, it can blank Fury's entire enter the battlefield ability. However, since Fury got banned and red decks got less good, the Forge Tender isn't very active right now, and Gadok Teague will likely be the number 1 Kithkin in the very near future. So, those are the top 10 Kithkin in Magic. If you're interested in building a deck around these little humanoids, check out the description, where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the more than 800 other MTG top 10s, including more that look at specific creature types, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me and the channel, you can do so by becoming a channel member or a patron, and you can find ways to do those things in the description. Thanks for watching.